I started my season in Pisgah National Forest a few weeks later than planned late September, when the first frost begins to burn the green out of the trees. The air up here always feels thinner, quieter, like sound gets swallowed by the ridges before it can echo. My post was one of the remote cabins, no cell signal, one shortwave radio, and a truck that barely made it up the old access road. I was fine with the solitude. I'd done seasons like this before: trail patrol, wildlife logs, minor maintenance. Nothing I couldn't handle. The pay wasn't much, but it came with stillness, which was the only thing I wanted after my divorce. My name's Luke Drummond. I've been a ranger for 10 years. I've worked fires, floods, missing persons, the usual. But I never saw anything I couldn't explain until that fall, the rotation, where for a few weeks, I shared this mountain with something that looked exactly like me. The first time I heard about it, it was just small talk. The supply pilot, an old guy named Rudy who ran the bi-weekly drops, handed me my crate and said, "Hey, someone from your crew was down by the South Trail earlier this week. You running double shifts now?" I told him no one else was assigned to my section. Rudy shrugged. "Huh, dead ringer for you, man. Same uniform. Same walk, too. Spooked the hell out of the hikers." I laughed it off. I'd only arrived 2 days before. Maybe another ranger had borrowed gear from the same depot, or a hiker got creative with surplus clothing. Out here, people do weird things to feel important. But when I got back to the cabin, I couldn't shake it. The lower trails were a solid 2-hour hike from my post. Whoever that was, they'd been down there before I even checked in. That night, the radio cracked once, a quick burst of static. I leaned in, but nothing followed. The next few days were uneventful, clear skies, dry ridgelines, the usual hawks circling thermals over the valley. I did my check-ins, logged the weather patterns, fixed a bent trail marker. Then on the fourth day, dispatch pinged me. "Drummond, you out near the falls?" "Negative," I said. "I'm about 12 miles north." "Copy that. Got a report from hikers, said a ranger told them that Trail 19 was closed due to fire damage. There's no active closure down there." "Describe him," she hesitated. "They said he had your badge name, Luke Drummond. You training someone I don't know about?" The line went silent for a moment, then crackled again. "You cutting early?" she asked. I didn't answer. Because right then, through the open window, I thought I saw movement by the tree line, just a figure standing on the slope below the cabin. Too far to make out, but the uniform looked familiar. When I stepped outside, there was nothing there. I tried to laugh it off. Isolation does strange things. You start hearing footsteps that aren't there, voices in the wind. But I still checked my trail cams that afternoon, mostly for bears, sometimes trespassers. The one near the water station blinked red, motion captured. I scrolled through the footage. The timestamp was from the same day, just past noon. I watched as a man in a ranger uniform walked past the camera column, steady stride, hat low. Then he turned slightly, and the face caught the lens. It was mine. The footage froze, grainy in the afternoon light. But it was unmistakable. Same stubble, same build, same badge, same number. The only problem was that at the exact time that clip was recorded, I had been sitting inside the cabin eating a cold sandwich, radioing dispatch about wind readings. I played it back 3 times. The sound, faint, muffled, wasn't the woods. It was breathing. Slow. Too close to the mic, like the person behind the camera had leaned in afterward. I deleted the file. That night, I locked the cabin door for the first time since I arrived. 3 nights later, I woke to a sound. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. 3 knocks, slow, evenly spaced. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. exactly. The sound came again, this time from the door, not the frame, not the wall. The door. I grabbed my flashlight, flicked the beam toward it. Nothing moved. When I finally opened it, there was no one outside. No sound, no movement. Just fog and the faint hiss of rain on leaves. Then I looked down. Boot prints, one set, size 11, just like mine, led into the cabin. Not away from it. They stopped beside my cot. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair by the door till sunrise, listening to the forest hum. When daylight came, I found no other prints outside, no drag marks, no sign of wildlife. Just that one trail leading in. I told dispatch there'd been a trespasser. She asked if I got a visual. I said no. She said, "Then who were you talking to on open frequency at 2:59?" I told her I wasn't on air. She read back the log, a short transmission from my ID code, repeating the same words twice. "All clear at post, going back inside." The problem was, those were the exact words I'd written in my field notes minutes before I heard the knocks. I didn't transmit anything. The following evening, I hiked down toward the trail intersection where hikers had seen the other ranger. The forest felt off, not dangerous, just wrong. The silence had texture to it, like the air was thicker than it should have been. The trees down there were old black oak and poplar, bark peeling in strips that hung like skin. The ground was damp and soft, the kind that records every step. After an hour of hiking, I heard a whistle. Short, tuned. Like someone trying to mimic a bird call and getting it slightly wrong. Then I saw movement between the trees. At first I thought it was a reflection sunlight hitting glass, but the figure stepped out fully. He was wearing my uniform, my badge, my damn face. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just raised one hand in motion like he was signaling for quiet. I froze. Then as quickly as he'd appeared, he turned and walked back into the trees. I followed, for maybe 30 yards before the fog closed in and he was gone. No tracks, no prints, no sign he'd ever been there. I hiked back fast. When I got to the cabin, the radio was already alive. Static, faint voices under it, mine again. Echoing, repeating transmissions from the past week. Then clear as day, my own voice said, "Don't follow him." The power flickered. That's when I knew I had to leave the mountain. I packed at dawn. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my coffee mug twice. I didn't bother with protocol or trail reports. I just hiked straight down to the service road. By late afternoon, I reached the ranger station in town. The supervisor, Harris, was in his office, sipping coffee, surprised to see me. "Luke," he said, frowning, "you back already?" "Something's wrong up there," I told him. "There's someone on that ridge. Looks like me. I've got it on camera. I need to file a report." He just stared at me for a second, confused. Then he turned his monitor toward me. My name, my ID number, a completed incident report dated 1 week prior, filed by me. Same phrasing, same signature, same timestamp I'd written on my field logs that morning. That's where a memory starts to fray. They say I fainted. I remember the room tilting, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, and someone shouting for a medic. They found another uniform up on the ridge when they went to collect my gear, folded neatly by the cabin door. Badge missing, boots gone. They said there were prints all around the porch, just one pattern, looping in circles, as if someone had been pacing all night. I never went back, but sometimes when I'm driving through Pisgah on off seasons, I'll see a ranger on the roadside in my mirror. Uniform crisp, hat low. And sometimes if I look too long, he looks back. It rained for 3 days straight after that first knock. The kind of rain that doesn't fall so much as it seeps into everything, your clothes, your boots, your sleep. Out here, rain doesn't have a sound. It's more of a presence, a slow breath against the cabin walls. A reminder that you're a long way from anyone who can help you. I kept telling myself that I was just tired, that I'd misheard the radio, that maybe the hikers had seen some drifter who'd stolen an old uniform. But I couldn't ignore one thing, the boot prints that had appeared inside of my cabin. They were mine. Same size, same tread pattern. But they started from the door and went inward, all the way to my cot. Then they stopped. There were none leading back out. I remember standing there that morning, staring at those muddy tracks in the dull gray light, and something inside me felt like it was shrinking. Like I was trying to fit myself into a smaller, safer space inside my own head. I didn't move for nearly 10 minutes. I just listened to the forest drip around me, and I realized how quiet it had gotten. Not peaceful quiet, that kind of quiet that makes you feel like you've already been heard. That afternoon, I hiked down to the South Trail to check the motion cams again. There were 5 along that section, 1 near the creek, 2 at the junction, another at a broken bridge, and one right by the old fire road that hasn't been used in years. When I got to the third one, I saw it right away. The red light was off. I took out the SD card, slid it into my field tablet, and watched the playback right there on the trail, raindrops spattering the screen. It was me. At least it looked like me. Same jacket, same posture, same radio clipped on the shoulder strap. But the way I was walking was wrong, like my body was trying to remember how to move. Slow, deliberate, feet dragging slightly through the dirt. I passed right by the camera at 3:13 a.m. At that time, I had been in the cabin. I even checked my own logbook. Later, I noted heavy rain, low visibility, at exactly 3 o'clock a.m. I tried to convince myself it was an old clip, maybe a glitch that recorded over older footage, but the timestamps lined up with last night's storm. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept the lantern lit and my boots on. Every time the wind creaked against the siding, I thought it was another knock. At around 2:47 a.m., the radio hissed awake. Static first, then a low hum, and then my voice. Cabin 2 responding, "Weather's clear tonight." I froze. My thumb was still hovering over the transmit button. I hadn't said anything. Then the same voice again, faint, distant. "You don't have to check the lower trail anymore. It's already done." My throat went dry. I pressed the button. "Who is this?" No reply. Just that same static, the faint sound of breathing my own, but thinner, raspier. When morning came, the air felt wrong, heavy, sour, like wet bark left too long in the sun. I decided to hike down to the ranger station, maybe get my head straight. The trail was half washed out from the rain, mud swallowing my boots every few steps. About halfway down, I stopped at a clearing that overlooks the valley, a wide, silent bowl of mist and half-drowned trees. That's when I saw him. He was standing about 50 yards down the slope, half hidden behind the brush. Uniform darkened by rain, shoulders slumped forward. Even from that distance, I knew it was me. He didn't move, didn't even shift his weight. Just stood there, head tilted slightly like a mirror frozen mid-thought. I wanted to call out, but I couldn't make a sound. My mouth opened and nothing came out. My radio crackled, then a burst of static followed by my voice again, whispering just above the noise, "Don't let him see you move." I backed away slowly, careful not to break eye contact. But when I blinked just once, he was gone. I made it down to the station by dusk. The lights inside were dim, the generator humming like a heartbeat. My supervisor, Daniels, looked up when I walked in. His face went pale. "Luke," he said slowly, "what the hell are you doing here again?" "What do you mean again?" I asked. He frowned, tapping at the clipboard. "You were here 2 days ago, filed a disturbance report. Said you saw something near the lower trail." My chest went tight. "That wasn't me." He stared for a long moment, then said, "You even signed it." He turned the clipboard around. There it was, my signature. Same slant, same shaky D in Drummond. I don't remember signing anything. I don't remember being here. That night, I insisted on sleeping at the station, but I couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again, the copy standing out there in the rain. And worse, I could feel it, like a weight pressing on the back of my mind. Something waiting for me to look the wrong way, to slip. I checked the security monitor sometime past midnight. There's an old camera pointing down the main path. I hit the playback just to distract myself. At 11:03 p.m., the feed flickered, and there I was, walking up the path toward the station. The real me, or whatever this thing was, stopped right in front of the door, looked up at the lens, and smiled. That's when the power cut out. Daniels ran for the generator. I stayed by the door, flashlight trembling in my hand. Outside, the forest was ink black, thick with fog, but through it, faintly, I saw a beam of light moving between the trees, a ranger's flashlight. I called out, "Daniels?" A voice answered mine again from the dark. "Come on, Luke, let's finish the patrol." I didn't open the door. I don't even remember deciding not to. I just knew that if I did, something else would step inside wearing my face. We found Daniel's flashlight the next morning. It was still on, lying in the mud, beam pointed uphill toward the ridge. The power came back around noon. I checked the security feed again. The last frame it recorded before the outage, a still shot of me standing at the door, my hand on the handle. But I never opened it. I swear I didn't. They pulled me off that rotation a week later. I told them everything about the radio, the hiker reports, the footage, the prints. Daniels didn't back me up. He just said I'd been overworked, probably hallucinating from isolation. When they sent the next ranger up to take over the cabin, she only lasted 3 nights. Called in, said someone kept knocking and leaving boot prints in the kitchen. She quit after that. They closed the cabin permanently the following spring. On paper, it was due to structural damage, but the report Daniels filed, the one I supposedly wrote, is still on record. I asked to see it once before I transferred out. He hesitated but handed it over. Typed, neat, clinical, just 1 paragraph. It ended with this line: "Trail patrol complete. Recommend no further activity near cabin site. Ranger Drummond remains on location for monitoring." Thing is, the date on that report is 1 week after I left the forest. And every so often, I still get a weak ping on my old Ranger radio, the same channel, same ID code, a voice that sounds exactly like mine saying, "Cabin 2 reporting in. Weather's clear tonight." I turned the radio off months ago, but sometimes late at night, I still hear it hum faintly in the drawer. Just breathing, waiting. Story 2, it snowed hard that week. The kind of storm that doesn't just fall, it lands, pressing down on everything until the forest seems to stop breathing. Out here in Big South Fork, you get used to silence. It's not the gentle kind, either. It's heavy, like the land itself is listening. My name's Cole Yates, 29 years old, ranger for District North, and the only one dumb enough to volunteer for winter patrol. The others call it the ghost season. Most of the cabins get sealed off before December, but mine sits near the high ridge line, just close enough to the main road that they keep it active in case someone gets stranded. That week it was just me, a snowcat that barely ran, and the hum of the old propane heater that liked to sputter out at 3 a.m. The morning it started was Tuesday. I woke up early, 5:20 before dawn. The storm had quieted, and for the first time in days, I could actually see the shape of the world again. Pine lines heavy with snow, the ridge white and clean, untouched. Or it should have been. There were footprints outside my cabin, human, booted, starting maybe 15 feet from my door and leading away into the tree line. But there was something off. The prints weren't right. The heels were pointing forward, toward the woods, but the toe impressions were deeper, dragging slightly. It took me a second to understand. Whoever had made them had been walking backward. I stood there, breath fogging in the cold air, staring at the pattern. The tracks went about 30 feet before disappearing into the pines. At first I thought maybe it was an optical illusion, snow drifted wrong, shadows playing tricks. But when I crouched down, I could see it clear as anything. The person had moved backward, step by step, away from the cabin. The thing that didn't make sense was that there weren't any tracks leading in, just out. The snow had been fresh all night. No wind to cover them, no second set to show where they'd started. It was as if someone had appeared out of thin air right outside my door and then walked backward into the forest. I radioed dispatch, static. The weather must have jammed the frequency again. And so I logged it, unexplained tracks, northwest perimeter, and tried not to think about it. By midday, I'd hiked down to the ravine. There's a narrow runoff trail there that gets tricky when it freezes. I was supposed to check for any stranded hikers, though nobody had signed in for weeks. The snow along the trail was untouched until I hit the first bend. There they were again, the same tracks. Perfectly shaped, deep, leading backward along the ridge, only this time they circled the trail once and doubled back uphill toward my cabin. When I reached the ridge line again, I stopped and looked behind me. The pattern almost seemed to form a ring, like someone had walked backward around my cabin all morning. The heater gave out that night. I tried fixing the valve, but the pilot light just sputtered and died. The temperature dropped fast. I lit the backup lantern and sat on the bunk, watching my breath move in little clouds. That's when I noticed the prints again. Not outside this time. Inside. Right there. On the wooden floor by my bed, small clumps of snow melting in a trail that led from the door to the center of the room. Reversed, heel to toe. They stopped about 2 feet from the cot, and there was a single drop of water, still falling from the air, landing softly on the boards. Like someone had just stepped out of the snow and was standing there invisible, waiting for me to notice. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my flashlight pointed at that spot, my hands shaking, listening to the forest creak and the wind move like breath through the walls. By dawn, the prints had faded, melted into small dark stains in the wood. I told myself I was imagining it. Isolation messes with you. You start hearing voices in the heater vents, seeing movement in your own reflection. It happens to everyone out here eventually. But the next morning, there was a new set. This time they started at the bed and led to the door still backward. That meant whoever, whatever it was, had been standing over me while I slept. I hiked out early that day, needed to clear my head. The snow was thigh-deep by the ravine now, and sunlight came through the trees in pale blue bands. Halfway down, I saw a shape in the snow, maybe 40 feet off the trail. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, but it wasn't. It was a man. He was standing perfectly still in the clearing, facing the slope. Uniform, ranger jacket, badge catching the light. Same build, same boots. The face, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't right either. Like it had been frozen mid-expression, skin stretched tight. Features blurred under a sheen of frost. He didn't move when I called out. Didn't answer. I stepped closer 10 feet, then 8 until I could see the steam of my breath floating between us. The air around him was colder. Dead air, like the inside of a freezer. I blinked once and he was gone. No prints where he'd been standing. Just snow. That night the knocking started. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I didn't open the door. The next morning, I found the footprints again reversed. As always, this time leading around the cabin in a perfect circle. I followed them for nearly half a mile into the forest. They wound between the trees, crossed the creek, climbed the ridge, then ended in a small hollow, and there, half buried in the snow, was my flashlight. Still on. The battery was half dead, the beam weak, flickering. But it was the same one I'd left inside the cabin the night before. I checked my pack, my belt, my gear all there, except for that flashlight. I can't explain how it got there. The light flickered once more and went out. By the time I made it back, dusk had fallen. The snow reflected every bit of fading light, turning the forest into a mirror of itself, every shadow a duplicate, every sound doubled. When I reached the door, there was a single set of footprints leading into the cabin. Just one set. Mine. Or maybe not. I hesitated, looked down, the toes were pointing inward. The snow around them undisturbed. That's when I noticed something else, faint shapes on the window glass. Finger marks, drawn from the inside. 5 long smudges trailing downward, like someone pressing their hand slowly against the pane and sliding it down. I stepped back. My own reflection in the glass looked strange, slightly off. Eyes darker than they should have been. The radio crackled from the table behind me. Cole Yates, reporting in. My heart stopped. It was my voice. Trail inspection complete, returning to base. I hadn't touched the radio. I hadn't said a word. The signal cut out, leaving only static. But if you listened close enough, beneath the hiss, you could hear it, the sound of boots crunching in snow. Slow, reversed. Like someone walking backward. That night, I barricaded the door with my cot, shoved the table against it. I could hear the wind scraping over the roof, something soft moving just beyond the wall, pacing, circling, stopping. I must have drifted off sometime before dawn, because when I woke, the world was silent again. Smooth. The storm had stopped. I pulled the table back and opened the door. The snow outside was untouched, clean, white, perfect. Except for one thing. A single line of footprints, perfectly spaced, leading into my cabin. No others leading out. And when I turned back inside, there were new prints on the floor, heel to toe, leading right up to where I stood. Then nothing. Just empty boards. And the faint sound of breathing behind me. The breath behind me was faint, so faint I almost convinced myself it was mine. But then it stopped when I inhaled and started again when I didn't. I spun around so fast the flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering across the floor and flickering out. The sound that followed wasn't movement. Not exactly, it was the whisper of cloth brushing wood. Something shifting, weight slow, deliberate, from one foot to another. I stood there in the half-dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The heater was dead again. The air so cold my breath hung like fog between me and the bunk. The prints, the new ones were wet now, glistening, fresh. They led right to where I stood, then stopped. I backed up till my shoulders hit the wall. Hello? No answer. Just the slow creak of the cabin as settling wood bending in under a weight that wasn't mine. The radio crackled again. A hiss, a low buzz. Then, don't turn around. It was my voice. I froze. Cole, it said again, slower, quieter. Don't. The cabin went dead silent after that. No wind, no sound at all. Even the forest outside had gone still. I don't know how long I stood there before the cold started to bite. My legs shook. My teeth clicked against each other so hard it hurt. When I finally moved, it was automatic. I grabbed my jacket, my pack, slung the radio over my shoulder. I needed to get off that ridge, storm or no storm. I didn't even bother closing the door behind me. The forest was empty. The kind of quiet that presses on your skull. That hollow kind of quiet you only hear in snow. I aimed for the old access trail that wound down toward the river. My boots sank half a foot with every step, breath clouding in front of me. Halfway down, I started seeing them again. Footprints, backward. Not mine. The stride was shorter, the pattern tighter. They weaved in and out of the trees, looping, doubling back on themselves like someone pacing in reverse. I followed them. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't stand not knowing. Maybe because some part of me needed to see what had been watching me. The trail narrowed near the ridge break. There's a drop there, maybe 15 feet down, to the creek bed. That's where I saw it. At first it looked like someone crouched in the snow, their back to me. But then it straightened slowly, joints cracking, head turning a little too far, too smoothly. It was wearing my jacket, my pack, my boots. But its face, it was wrong. The eyes were wide, empty. The mouth was a thin black line stretched too tight. The skin looked wet, like it had been thawed from ice. It tilted its head, like it was studying me. Then it took a step backward, and the snow didn't crunch. I tried to speak, but the cold locked my throat. "Who are you?" I managed, but it only mirrored the sound, repeating my voice, same tone, same breath perfectly. "Who are you?" It smiled then, a long, crooked thing that made no sense on my own face. Then it took another step backward and vanished behind the ridgeline. I ran after it. By the time I reached the edge, there was nothing, just the sound of wind moving through the trees below. The snow at the drop was smooth, no prints, no drag marks, no sign of a fall. When I looked down, I noticed something at the base of the drop, something dark half buried in the snow. My radio, still on. I climbed down, hands numb, breath ragged. The radio was hissing softly. I picked it up, thumbed the button. "Dispatch, this is Yates, I need..." "Dispatch, this is Yates," my voice cut in. "I need..." The echo came from the speaker itself, perfectly delayed like a recording. Then both voices overlapped mine and its. "I need help." The static built until it was all I could hear. A long, low hum like something deep beneath the snow was vibrating through the ground. Then silence. The air changed after that. I could smell something metallic, faint, like cold iron or wet pennies. The snow around me looked off, two faint impressions just below the surface. like something had moved under it, tracing circles. When I turned back toward the ridge, I saw movement again. Something was standing on the edge where I'd just been. Same height, same posture. It leaned forward slowly, almost curiously, watching me. Then it lifted one hand my hand and waved. I bolted. The forest blurred into streaks of white and black. The snow came down harder, sharp like sand. Every tree looked the same. My compass spun uselessly. The GPS flickered and died. I ran until I couldn't breathe. When I stopped, I realized I'd come full circle. My cabin stood ahead, lanterns still burning inside. The door was open. But the thing that froze me wasn't that. It was the tracks in front of it, dozens of them, all reversed, all leading into the cabin. None coming out. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but it was getting dark and I had nowhere else to go. The temperature was dropping fast, maybe 10 degrees already. If I stayed out there, I'd freeze before midnight. So I went in. The air inside was warm. The heater somehow was working again. The lantern flickered gently. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, except for the fact that my boots were already by the door. And I was still wearing them. That's when I heard the floorboards creak from behind the bed. Slow, careful. I raised the flashlight. Something crouched there, half in shadow, head bowed. It looked like me, same jacket, same hands. But the skin was gray, lips split open from cold, eyes black from frost. It lifted its face slowly until the light caught it full on. I felt my body go rigid, because it wasn't mimicking me anymore. It was breathing for me. Each time it exhaled, my own lungs refused to. My chest locked up, my vision dimmed at the edges. I stumbled back, hit the wall. My vision tunneled. I could hear two sets of breathing, now mine, shallow and ragged, and it's steady and deep, like it was drawing the air I couldn't. Then it spoke. "You left the door open." It was my voice, dry, whispering through cracked lips. I lunged for the door, but it was already there, standing in front of it, motionless, blocking the way. Then everything went dark. When I woke, sunlight was bleeding through the window. My mouth was dry, head pounding. The cabin was empty. No footprints on the floor, no frost, no shadow where it had been. Outside, the snow was smooth again, a clean sheet. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined all of it. The cold, the tracks, the voice cabin fever, exhaustion, whatever. Then I saw the prints, one set, leading from the woods to my door. Not reversed this time, normal, except they weren't mine. They were smaller, narrower stride, lighter step. I followed them out to the tree line. They went maybe 20 feet before fading into the white. When I turned back, my stomach dropped. There were two sets now. One going out mine, one going in, but the door was closed. That night, I didn't light the lantern. I sat in the dark, radio silent beside me. Sometime after midnight, the signal kicked on again, soft static, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then, faintly, through the noise, "Cole Yates, do you copy?" It was my voice. "You forgot something." The transmission ended with the faint crunch of snow and 3 slow knocks, not on the cabin's door this time, but under the floorboards. They found the cabin 2 weeks later when I didn't report in. They said the heater had exploded carbon monoxide buildup. I guess that makes sense. That's what they wrote in the report anyway. But when the new ranger took over my post that winter, he logged something strange his first morning there. A single set of footprints outside the cabin, backward, leading away into the trees. And inside, on the cabin wall, carved deep into the wood by a knife or something harder, were 4 words, uneven, shaky, almost human. "I'm still walking home." Story 3. It started like any other quiet shift in Catoctin, the kind where the cold moves like fog and the woods sound like they're holding their breath. Derek Sloan had been stationed there for nearly a decade, long enough to know every hollow, every game trail, every half-collapsed section of fence in the park. He was used to night watches, used to silence. used to the sense that he was the last person awake for miles. But this winter, something changed. It began with the lights. He first saw them 3 weeks into his rotation, tiny white specks far down in the valley. At first, he assumed they were headlights, maybe kids sneaking up the service trail from Thurman. But there's no road that cuts through that hollow, and no one in their right mind hikes those ravines after dark. He made a note of it in his log. Visual, possible campers, 2347, southeastern slope. The next night they were back, 2 of them, moving in slow, deliberate patterns, pausing, then shifting in sync, like 2 people walking with lanterns. He radioed dispatch just to confirm there weren't any backcountry permits out there. Oh, nothing. When the 3rd night came, the lights started earlier, closer. Derek grabbed his GPS, a headlamp, and the service rifle, standard protocol for possible trespassers. He started down the main trail from his cabin, the cold air chewing at his fingers. His breath came in tight bursts of white fog. The lights shimmered faintly through the trees below. He marked his position, turned left down a deer run, and kept his eyes fixed on them. Every time he blinked, they seemed to drift, sliding just out of focus, always the same distance away. When he checked his GPS, he froze. He hadn't moved more than 50 yards from the cabin. The device still placed him at his start point, though his boots were sunk half a mile deep into the forest floor. He tried resetting it. Nothing. Just the same coordinates. The same blinking arrow. He stared at the screen for a long time, then back toward the valley. The lights were gone. By the time he got back, it was past midnight. He logged the incident, briefly. The report would sound strange in writing. He'd handled poachers, lost hikers, even a black bear that took a liking to the ranger dumpsters one summer. But nothing about those lights made sense. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. 3 nights later, he was woken by static on the radio. The volume knob twitched on its own, squealing, then flattening into a low hiss. He leaned over, still half asleep, and heard it through the noise. "Derek!" A whisper, or an echo. He sat up so fast the cot frame creaked. "Control, repeat. Who's calling?" Static, then faintly again. Derek Sloan. He killed the transmission and scanned every frequency. Dead air. For hours he sat there in the dark, the sound of the wind in the rafters, pressing down like a heartbeat. He didn't go back to sleep. The next day he checked the tower logs. No one had radioed his frequency. No one had even been scheduled within a 20-mile radius. When night came again, he didn't even need the binoculars. The lights had climbed halfway up the ridge. He stood at his window, watching them blink between the pines. They didn't sway like lanterns anymore. They pulsed, almost breathing. He backed away from the glass and reached for his rifle. The lights brightened, then began to move up the slope, one after another, like a slow procession. That was when his cabin lights flickered. His radio crackled again. "Derek!" This time the voice was clearer. His voice. He slammed the power off, heart pounding, and braced himself against the wall. The static still came, faint and wet, like someone breathing through water. Outside, something scraped against the wooden porch. A single slow drag. He waited. Then 3 sharp knocks on the cabin door. He didn't move, didn't speak. When the first light spilled under the doorframe, thin, white, steady, he raised the rifle, though he wasn't sure what he'd shoot at. It passed across the floorboards like mist, glowing in a narrow beam, then dimming until only moonlight remained. The next morning, his boots were covered in dried mud. There were 2 sets of prints outside his cabin, both fresh, both heading downhill. None returning. When the supply chopper came 3 days later, they found the cabin door open, radio still hissing faintly on the desk. The valley below was calm and silver under fog. From the ridge, just before sunrise, the pilot swore he saw a single light in the hollow, pulsing once, then twice, then gone. They never filed it as a disappearance, not officially. Derek Sloan's record just ends with a single unfinished log entry dated November 12, 1984. Lights in valley again, 2, maybe 3, Moving faster now. Sound on radio, can't tell if it's... That's where it cuts off. I found that entry 20 years later. I was a junior ranger on the same rotation, stationed out of Thurmont Base. His cabin was still there, barely standing, but the logbook was dry inside a metal footlocker. I'd been warned about Catoctin winters, about the fog that swallows trails and the winds that echo through the hollows like voices. No one mentioned the valley lights. The first week was uneventful. The roads iced over early, and the only company I had was the low hum of the radio and the sound of snowmelt dripping from the eaves. The cabin still smelled faintly of smoke and machine oil. I thought about Sloan a lot, how a man could just vanish and leave no trace but a few words in a logbook. On the 8th night, around 2 a.m., I saw them. Down in the valley, two faint white glows. Not fire, not headlights. Too clean, too steady. I leaned against the window, trying to find some shape behind them. The glass fogged from my breath. The lights moved almost side by side through the tree line. I went for my binoculars. The lenses caught the faintest shimmer, motion that didn't make sense, like the beams weren't shining from anything, but through something. I stood there for almost half an hour, waiting for them to dim. They didn't. I tried the radio. Static. Switched frequencies. More static. Then a click. "Ranger Sloan to base," a voice said. I froze. The transmission was faint, cracked by static. Reporting visual, lights in valley again. The words were identical to the last entry in his log. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I hiked halfway down the ridge to the overlook. The snow was clean, no tracks but mine. But when I looked back toward the cabin, I saw something dark near the porch steps. A pair of boot prints, half melted in the frost, both leading away from the door. That evening, the valley lights appeared again, closer now, hovering just beyond the first tree line. I turned off every lamp inside the cabin, listening. The wind pressed against the glass. The forest was silent except for the occasional creak of frozen limbs shifting under snow. Then I heard the radio click on. If anyone's listening, the same transmission I'd read about in Sloan's final log. "Don't come up the mountain." The voice was mine this time. My own cadence, my own breathing between the words. The sound made my skin crawl. I yanked the power cord from the wall, but the voice kept talking, through the unplugged speaker, through the air itself. Each word came softer, slower. They're closer now. Outside, the lights moved up the slope. 1, 2, 3. I could see them weaving between the trunks, faint halos brushing the mist. They weren't random anymore. They climbed in sync, each stopping at intervals, pausing as though waiting for me to notice. By the time they reached the tree line just below the cabin, I was standing in the doorway with my flashlight trembling in my grip. "Who's out there?" I shouted. My voice cracked in the cold air. No answer, just the whistle of wind through the pines. Then the nearest light brightened. It wasn't a lantern. It wasn't a flame. It was a shape, an outline, like a figure holding something small that pulsed with white heat. It stood perfectly still. I took one step forward. The beam of my flashlight flickered over it, but the light seemed to bend away, sliding around its form. Another step closer, and I saw what looked like a face. Not glowing, not human, just pale and expressionless, as though carved from fog itself. The thing tilted its head, and for the first time I heard it breathe, a deep, hollow sound that seemed to come from every direction. Behind it, the other two lights rose higher, aligning with the first, forming a narrow path down the slope. And I don't know what came over me, but I followed. Every step forward felt wrong. The air thickened. My ears rang. The snow beneath my boots crunched too loudly like I was walking inside a hollow drum. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered out. When it came back, the lights had vanished. I was alone, surrounded by dark, silent trees. I turned back toward the cabin. That's when I saw the footprints. 2 sets, mine and another's, running parallel. Only the second set wasn't pressed into the snow. It was rising from it, like something had stepped backward through time. I ran. When I reached the cabin, the radio was still hissing softly. Through the static, I thought I heard someone breathing. Then a voice, barely audible. "You're almost home." I don't remember much after that, just the lights fading, one by one, and the cold pressing against my chest until everything went quiet. They found the cabin 3 days later, same as they did with Sloan. The logs were intact. My pack was still by the door. The only thing missing was me. But the rescuers said something strange when they hiked out. They said at night, as they looked back toward the ridge, they could see faint lights moving in the valley below. 3 of them, shifting in perfect rhythm. And when the wind changed, they swore they heard a voice from the static of their radios, calling their names. Story 4. They sent me down there because no one else wanted to go. That's usually how it happens in this job. My name's Evan Ross. Been a ranger in Harlan County, going on 16 years now. I've handled forest fires, lost kids, black bear calls, and one meth lab explosion that still rings in my ears when it's quiet. But the mines? Those I never liked. There's a weight to the ground in Harlan. The hills here aren't just dirt, they're hollow, honeycombed with shafts that stretch for miles beneath your feet. The coal companies sealed most of them after the 50s collapses. But when the wind's right, people still say you can hear the miners singing underground. Not like ghosts, they say, just tired men trying to finish one last shift. It was March when the call came in. Spring thaw had loosened the slope above the old loading shaft, and the Tourist Bureau wanted someone to check the barrier before opening the scenic trails again. The shaft wasn't supposed to be accessible. Rusted gate, warning signs, no trespassing. But hikers always found a way. So they sent me. The hike in was rougher than I remembered. Trees still leafless. The sky that flat gray you only get before a storm. I parked the truck at the service road, slung my light pack, and followed the creek down into the hollow. The closer I got, the colder it felt. Not wind chill, but the kind of cold that comes up from the ground. The entrance sat behind a curtain of briars and old timbers. Loaded number 3, sealed 1954, the rusted plate read. I ducked under the fence, boots sinking into soft red mud. The air inside smelled like damp stone and rust. I switched on my headlamp. The beam cut through a narrow tunnel lined with rotted support beams. A stream of condensation ran down one wall, dripping into a puddle that mirrored the light. Halfway in, I heard it. A low hum so deep I felt it in my ribs before I recognized it as sound. It came from the rock itself, like a tuning fork struck somewhere miles below. I froze. Listen. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't machinery. It was a voice. The tone rose, soft, rhythmic. A few notes, no words. I tried the radio. "Base, this is Ranger Ross checking loading site. You copy?" Static. Then faintly through the hiss, I caught something. 3 notes, like someone singing along. I shut the radio off. The sound faded. It took another 20 minutes to reach the first barrier. Just a line of chain link and a warning placard. Someone had been here recently. Fresh boot marks in the dust. The gate bent slightly inward, one padlock sheared clean through. I knelt to look closer. The prints went past the gate, deep and deliberate, leading toward the collapse about 40 feet ahead. That's when the hum started again. Louder this time, echoing from deeper in the mine. The radio on my belt crackled to life all on its own, whispering fragments of melody, old coal miners' songs, the kind my grandfather used to sing when he worked these hills. 16 tons, and what do you get? It was barely more than static, but I could hear the pattern, the rise and fall of human voices. I told myself it was feedback, maybe stray radio interference from the county band. But that didn't explain the timing. It started only when the humming did. I followed the prints. The tunnel narrowed, beams creaking over my head. My light skimmed over an old pickaxe embedded in the wall, a half-collapsed lantern, bones of old timber supports blackened by moisture. Warm. Then the air changed. Warmer, heavier. The humming rose again, now layered with what sounded like multiple voices, distant but in unison. I rounded the last bend. There was no open passage, just a wall of rubble sealing the end of the shaft, yet the sound was louder here than anywhere else. vibrating the floor under my boots. It wasn't echoing, it was coming through the rock. I turned off the headlamp. Darkness swallowed everything. And the singing continued. Low voices, dozens of them, weaving through one another, humming something that felt like a hymn. The words were too muffled to catch, but I could feel the sorrow in the tone. It sounded like men singing to keep themselves calm while the walls closed in. I stood there for what felt like an hour. My radio hissed, flickered, and then, quietly, almost clearly, I heard my own name. Evan! I nearly dropped the light. Evan, come down! The voice came not from the rock, but from behind me. I spun around, nothing but darkness and the faint drip of water. Who's there? No answer. Then, click. My headlamp went out. The black was absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. My breath came fast, echoing too loud against the walls. I could still hear the humming, closer now, like the sound had filled the tunnel. I felt something brush past my leg, cold and heavy as wet cloth. I stumbled back, hit the wall, grabbed for the spare flashlight on my belt. When I switched it on, the tunnel looked different. The collapse was gone. In its place stretched a corridor lined with timber supports, fresh, solid, untouched by rot. The air smelled of coal dust and sweat. And there were men, dozens of them, standing in the shaft, faces lit by old carbide lamps, helmets low, eyes shadowed, skin gray with dust. They were singing, softly, rhythmically. One of them looked up, his pupils white, blank, but fixed on me. He mouthed the words without sound. The others joined, their humming swelling until it filled the tunnel like a heartbeat. The ground began to shake. Beams groaned, rocks shifted. I stumbled forward, covering my head as pebbles rained down. The light flared white, and then everything went black. When they found me 2 days later, I was 20 feet from the shaft entrance, lying face down in the mud. My radio was broken. My flashlight cracked. They said I was humming when they pulled me out, something low and steady. I don't remember much, except that the song felt familiar, like I'd known it all my life but couldn't recall where from. The medic said I must have gotten turned around, maybe fell and hit my head, carbon monoxide maybe, hallucinations. But I know what I heard, because sometimes, even now, when the wind blows through the hollows just right, I can still hear it. The faint hum of men deep beneath the ground. And sometimes, before I fall asleep, I catch myself humming along. They said I only spent one night out there, but that's not what it felt like. After they found me and patched me up, they brought me into the ranger station in Harlan for debriefing. I remember sitting there under the buzzing fluorescent lights, hands still caked in red dirt, boots ruined. The district chief, a man named Hollis, poured me coffee and asked what happened inside. When I told him about the singing, he just nodded slowly, not surprised. He said every few years someone hears the voices. Hikers, surveyors, even a mining inspector once. It's the mountain, he said. It remembers who's still down there. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out. For days I kept waking up in the middle of the night with that humming in my ears, low and rhythmic, vibrating in my chest like an echo you can't place. The first night I heard it, I grabbed my radio out of instinct, thinking maybe someone was calling for help again. Static, then faintly, music. Old miners' songs again. Verses I hadn't heard since I was a boy. Dark as a dungeon, damp as the dew. The voice was my grandfather's. I know how crazy that sounds, but I swear on my life it was him. He worked those mines before the accidents, before the collapses. He used to hum those same songs while sharpening his tools out on the porch. He died when I was 12. I sat there in the dark, holding the radio to my chest, listening to that old familiar voice drifting through the static. Then it stopped. Just dead air. That next morning, I found a small mound of coal dust outside my trailer door. Not black dirt, coal dust. the fine kind you only find underground. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe it stuck to my boots. Maybe the wind blew it from the storage lot. But when I swept it up and came home from work the next day, it was there again. Same place, same size. That's when I decided to go back. Not officially. There was no record of my first trip, and Hollis told me to stay off the loading site until further notice. But I couldn't sleep. I had to know. I drove out there after dusk, parking at the same spot by the creek. The air was thick with fog and the smell of rain. I left my truck running this time, lights on just in case. When I reached the gate, it was open. No sign of forced entry this time, just hanging loose, swinging gently in the wind. The tunnel looked darker than before, like the air itself had thickened inside it. I clicked on my headlamp and stepped in. Drip, drip, same water leak, same stale metallic taste in the air. But about 20 feet in, the hum started again. Only now I could hear words. We never left. It was faint, warped by the echoes, but unmistakably human. I turned the light down the tunnel and froze. Someone was standing there. Helmet, coveralls, lantern hanging from his belt. He wasn't facing me, just standing still, head bowed, humming. I called out, "You can't be in here! This area's restricted!" He didn't move. The hum grew louder. I stepped forward, heart hammering, until I was close enough to see the back of his jacket. It was faded, caked in dust, but I could still make out the patch on the shoulder, U.S. Forest Service. And beneath that, my name, Ross. I staggered back. My boot hit something soft. I looked down. Another pile of ash. Still warm. When I looked up again, the figure was gone. The humming hadn't stopped. It was now everywhere, like it was coming from the rock, the air, my own lungs. I stumbled backward, light flickering, trying to find the way out. The tunnel didn't look right. The beams were twisted, leaning inward like ribs closing in. My radio started crackling again. Only this time, there was no song, just breathing, slow, deliberate. "Evan." The voice came through the static, calm, almost kind. "It's not so bad down here." Then silence. The light flickered once more and died. The next few minutes, hours, I can't piece together clearly. I remember falling. I remember cold air rushing past me, water somewhere close by, and that endless humming, like the earth itself was singing through the bones of the mountain. When I woke again, I was outside. The sun was up. My truck was gone. They said I must have wandered out before the rain started, collapsed near the creek, hypothermic. 2 hikers found me the next morning. I spent a week in Harlan General. They checked me for head trauma, carbon monoxide, even psychosis. Clean bill of health. But I'm not the same. Sometimes when I'm driving at night, I'll glance in the rearview mirror and swear I see the reflection of a helmet lamp glowing behind me. And a few nights ago, I took the old radio out of storage. I tuned it to static just to see. At first, nothing. Then faintly a hum. Not singing, not words. Just that low, endless note that vibrates through the floorboards. It's been on ever since. I can't shut it off. Last night, I woke to the smell of coal dust again. The window was open, wind blowing in from the hills. And on the nightstand, just a little pile of ash. Still warm. I think they're calling me back. And maybe next time I won't make it out.